Hello, everyone. I'm Jenna Paone from A Mighty Blaze. Welcome to our Thursday Celebrity Conversations. Today, we are so excited to have Tim Johnston here hosting author Amanda Brainerd as we celebrate Amanda's debut release, Age of Consent. Welcome, you two. How's it going?
Very well, thanks.
Excellent.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to intro these guys real quick and then turn the conversation over to them because we know that they're the ones you really want to hear from as much as I would love to believe it's me. First off, our celebrity guest interviewer, Tim Johnston. Tim Johnston is the author of the novels Descent, The Current, and the story collection Irish Girl, and the young adult novel Never So Green. A New York Times, USA Today, and Indie National bestseller, Descent has been published internationally and optioned for film. Also optioned for film, The Current won the Midland Authors 2020 Adult Fiction Award. The Stories of Irish Girl won an O. Henry Prize, the New Letter Award for Writers, and the Givell Press Short Story Award, while the collection itself won the 2009 Catherine Ann Porter Prize in Short Fiction. Tim's stories have also appeared in the New England Review, New Letters, the Iowa Review, the Missouri Review, Double Take, Best Life Magazine, and Narrative Magazine, among others. He holds degrees from the University of Iowa and the University of Massachusetts Amherst. In 2011 to 2012, he was the Jenny McKean Moore Writer in Washington Fellow at the George Washington University, and he is the recipient of the 2015 Iowa Author Award. Tim currently lives in Iowa City, Iowa. Of his latest novel, The Current, the Washington Post says, a first-rate thriller, past and present merge in the current. Tim Johnston's atmospheric, exquisitely suspenseful novel of two murderers separated by 10 years. And People magazine says, gripping. Johnston's masterful novel is worth lingering over. It soars above the constraints of a traditional thriller and pulls you deep into the secrets of a grief-stricken town. Welcome, Tim. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for that lovely introduction.
You're so welcome. And now for the star of the day, Amanda, congratulations on your debut novel. Lest you think that that is somehow Amanda's first accomplishment, it is by far not. This woman has a very successful career and lots of accolades of her own. We're going to focus on the novel today, though. Amanda Brainerd is a New York City real estate broker, wife, and mother of three. She graduated from Harvard College and earned a Master of Architecture from Columbia University after being expelled from Choate Rosemary Hall boarding school in the 10th grade. And I can't wait to get into the story. And obviously that influenced your writing because, of course, Age of Consent begins in a boarding school, which is amazing. And I am already obsessed with it because of that. Her debut novel, Age of Consent, is a slick, daringly honest story about three young women in the 1980s who negotiate fraught friendships, sexuality, class, and predatory older men on the journey from innocence to independence. The narrative begins at a Connecticut boarding school, then follows the characters to New York City. A captivating, timeless novel, Age of Consent intimately evokes the heady freedom of our teenage years. Age of Consent was named one of the best books of summer by Good Morning America, Cosmopolitan, Harper's Bazaar, and Pop Sugar. Publishers Weekly calls Age of Consent a bracing debut. The takes on parental neglect and the ways young women are taught to see sex as transactional make this much more than a throwback. And Booklist says, heady and atmospheric, Brainerd's debut weaves the energy of glamorous, arty, and treacherous Manhattan into the coming-of-age dramas of her three adventurous heroes. Welcome, Amanda. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Jenna.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much for being here. Well, nobody wants to hear me talk anymore, so I'm going to turn it over to
You're doing great. You just keep talking.
Keep going.
Yeah,
You're great.
Well, just
nothing like streams of accolades.
I know nobody ever really likes hearing the praise, but it's also like it's like nice, right? You're like, oh, I am pretty awesome. So.
Oh, yeah, that's what I feel. I feel much more awesome right now.
Well, I hope you do. And I'm going to let Tim take it away and chat with Amanda about Age of Consent. And I'll chime in from time to time. Viewers, please feel free to put some comments in our chat and let us know if you have any questions for the authors. All right, take it away, Tim.
Okay. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Tim.
We're seeing each other for the first time ever, I think,
Yep.
as far as I know. But congratulations. This is an exciting, big moment, your debut novel. I imagine just came out like 2 days ago, right? I mean,
Yesterday.
officially.
2 days ago. You're right. No.
I
yeah.
have July 14th. So, and it's been, and Amanda just barely touched on all the great praise it's been getting, all the great press it's been getting, the buzz. I've got a fly buzzing around me right now. So that's all, I imagine, very exciting. And without getting too much into the details of what it's like to publish a book at this particular time in history, I wonder if you just talk a little bit about what it's like to be publishing your debut novel.
Well, first of all, because Jenna asked me, here's the novel.
Yes. Oh, yes. Hold it.
I recognize it.
It's
Yes.
an object. I don't have anything to compare it to, Tim. I mean, this is my first novel, so
Yeah.
I miss the fact that I could have stood in front of people in my local bookstore and signed books, but my launch event had like 170 people at it. Those people were all over the country, and they could not have joined me for that in another.
And what did that look like? What was that? Was that a Zoom thing? Was that what was
it? Zoom launch in conversation with another writer at McNally Jackson, and they did an amazing job. And we had a huge turnout. And my local bookshop in New York can probably hold 50 people maximum. So
yeah,
actually, it was really exciting. And then also, I get to do this with you. That wouldn't have necessarily happened in another time. I get to be part of a mighty blaze that is invented whole cloth because of this crisis. And so I think also people are reading more than ever. I mean, I'm very involved in the performing arts in New York City, and all those things are shut down completely, and tragically so. And, books, everyone's at home reading. So I think in some ways, there's a real silver lining here.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about the virtual potential of so much more people getting packed into a bookstore. I mean, obviously there's that excitement of the first book tour, being sent around and feeling, like you're the thing, you're the hot new thing. You get to go to all the bookstores and people come in, but sometimes you get to those bookstores and there's like 3 people, and 2 of them are the staff. So count your blessings. I mean, that's really a great way to think about it. You got over, what'd you say, 170 people?
Yeah. And then I have another event late tonight. I don't know who's going to be there because it's at 10 o'clock Eastern time, but 7 p.m. Pacific time at Chevalier's Books in Los Angeles, and also in conversation.
And, the beautiful thing is you don't have to fly.
I don't have to go to LA.
Yeah, I know. I'm totally.
There's pluses and minuses, but for me, I'm so excited. It's probably mostly pluses.
Yeah. Well, I was going to get back into the whole, COVID era thing, but that's really interesting to know. I was really more interested in knowing just what it's like for you as a first time, novelist, and the emotional journey and that kind of thing. And
I've been through so much. And I've suffered so greatly to get to this point, as you know. I mean, I don't want to depress the viewer, but
no, let's hear about your suffering.
Okay. Well, so I started writing this novel. I never thought of writing a novel. I mean, I never thought of writing at all until so my launch on Tuesday was with New Yorker writer Nick Paumgarten, and he's an old friend of mine. And in 2009, we had, my husband and I had him, and we had him at dinner with his wife and a couple other people. And Nick and I were talking about being parents ourselves and how crazy it was in the late 70s and 80s and the really dreadful things that a lot of parents did. And can you believe what happened to so-and-so? And we were and all of a sudden I just thought, oh my God, I'm writing that story. That is such an amazing story. But I thought about it really in terms of reportage. Like I started by interviewing parents, kids, asking them about that era. Of course, people had different attitudes, and I honed in on the people that I thought were like the most extreme cases. And I saw it as sort of an oral history, kind of in the Edie by Gene Stein model, or any other oral history you might know. But pretty quickly, I realized that I wanted to make this into a full-blown novel, and I started writing it. And it took me almost 3 years. I have a full-time job in real estate, very hectic, busy job, 3 children, a husband, pets, cooking, cleaning, laundry. Anyway, and
And
so
are all the children at home right now? Are they young enough to be?
actually it's taken me so long to get to this point that only one is left.
Oh,
So, but so I started, you know, it took me 3 years to even write the first draft. And I sent it out to, you know, so-and-so, oh, so-and-so's mother's an agent, and so-and-so's sister's brother's husband, you know, whatever, is an agent. So I sent it out to sort of 3 agents. They all rejected it except for one who sat down with me and gave me the advice that it should be made into a young adult novel, and that the first half of it set in boarding school by itself would be a great YA novel. YA was selling, fiction wasn't. So I spent probably another 2 to 3 years making the first chapter into a YA novel. That didn't work. I wrote a completely other eco-romance YA novel. By the way, I'm not a YA writer and I don't even really read YA, but I thought that was what I should be doing. And finally, the writer, I was finding an apartment for writer Fran Lebowitz, and it took forever to find her an apartment, and for a variety of reasons. She's very picky, but as she should be. Discerning, she's discerning. Mm-hmm. So we were looking for an apartment, and finally, like 2 or 3 years into it, somehow it slipped that I was writing a book, and she said, Amanda, I want to see it. And so I gave her the last YA novel, and she read it, and she said, I don't understand. You're such a good writer. Why are you writing a novel like this? And I said, well, there's a journey here. There's an arc. And she said, well, tell me what happened. And I told her the whole story, and she said, I want to see the first novel. I was like, Fran, there's too much dialogue. I didn't know how to write a novel. She's like, there's no such thing as too much dialogue. I want to see it. So I showed it to her. She read it. She goes, I love it. I'm showing it to my friend who's a famous editor who will remain nameless, who helped me a lot. And she read it and she said, I really love it, Amanda, but there's too much dialogue. I said, that's what I told Fran. She's like, I don't know why Fran didn't notice that. So I rewrote it. I found an agent and we sold it to Viking. But that was like, I don't know, it was like 9 years later. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, it's a long process. But I mean, one of the great advantages of, you know, being in New York and not just being in New York, but working in the circles that you work in, it's the connections. You know, you were able to.
I definitely, you know, I think you can't get an agent or a book published, as you know, through connections. I mean, I know other writers who are far more connected than I am who have been unable to do that.
Yeah, it's not all about connections, certainly.
No, because it's sales, it's a business. I mean, they don't want to ruin their reputation representing somebody but it does help. I didn't end up getting my agent through querying. I was connected to the agent through one of her clients, but I'd been connected to many other agents before that in that same way. It just didn't work. And it was just the right time for the book. And the book was in a shape where it could be purchased and could be sold. And it was just a really long time getting there.
Yeah. No, I can relate. I won't go into it in too much detail, but my first novel was never intended to be a young adult novel. I had written what I thought was a perfectly legitimate adult novel, which, like yours, had a young protagonist, even younger than yours, 12-year-old boy, who was, you know, navigating some pretty spooky sexual territory at home. And so I thought that automatically made it an adult novel. But, you know, it was a 12-year-old protagonist, and all the adult editors who saw it kept saying, isn't this a young adult novel? Isn't this a young adult novel? And I kept saying, no, it's not. And finally my agent said, well, we've tried every adult editor in New York. Let's try a young adult editor. And the first one took it as a young adult book.
So funny. I mean,
I had these questions about yours because you do about age of consent, because you also have, you know, teenage young protagonists. And there's almost nothing, I think now, even more so than when my young adult novel came out in 2002, there's literally nothing that's off limits for the young adult novel in terms of subject matter and, you know, and intensity of experience. And I just wondered if did anyone else did your editor or anyone ever bring it up
Was
to
your
you?
first novel first person?
It was when it went out. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that is the key right there. I mean, I think I don't know the young adult market, but all the young adult novels I've read, most of them are first person, so that you have that immediate intimacy with the protagonist. My novel is 3 points of view of 3 different teenagers. I think that makes a big difference because it already, to a certain degree, third person, as you know, sort of distances the reader from the protagonists and allows the author to have much more leeway with storytelling and point of view, because you're not just
definitely. Yeah.
That is a big difference.
Well, just ironically, the first thing they had me do after they bought my first person novel was change it to third person.
You just can't win.
So there's that.
How do you feel about that, being, sold as a young adult novel versus an adult novel?
Sorry?
How did you feel about having
it was hard. It was hard. Because I was like, I'm not a young adult writer and I want to write for adults and play with the big people. But it was FSG, and it was Farrar, Straus and Giroir, and they did a really nice job with it. And it was in a time before, you could self-promote. It was before Facebook and all that kind of stuff, but they didn't really have the means to really promote it, in the way, and young adult hadn't taken off the way it has now. But so it was, but it was a good experience, and I think it's a good book, and I'm glad it got out there.
And also, you got your first novel published.
I got my first novel,
by a really great house, and they have a great, young adult section. Department.
No, they did a great job. Can we go back to your biography just a little bit before we jump into the book?
Sure.
Because Jenna touched on it, but you're a real estate broker now, mother of 3. I have it here that you went to Harvard College and then earned a Master of Architecture from Columbia. And that was all before getting expelled or after getting expelled from Cohate Rosemary boarding school in the 10th grade.
True.
It's called Coke. Its nickname is Coke Rosemary Hall.
Coke Rosemary Hall. Okay. And is that a private? That's like a private girls' school.
It's co-ed.
Oh, it is. Okay. So what did you get expelled for?
So 2 weeks before the end of the year. So it's what happened in the novel. So my friend and I had a radio show on Friday or Saturday night, and our slot was 10 to midnight and curfew was 10. So we were on air in the basement of some building after curfew, which was super exciting. But it presented us with the opportunity to break the rules when we found out that U2 was playing at a tiny theater in New Haven, which was about 20 minutes away. She was a day student, so she had permission to be off campus after curfew. She could come and go as she pleased. I didn't have that permission, but we decided we recorded a radio show on a cassette tape, which we then stuck in the player, pressed play, and then fled campus and drove to New Haven. Now, I was 15, and lots of the teachers in boarding school had just graduated from college. They were in their early 20s. To me, they could have been 50. They just were so old. But a bunch of them were at the concert, and they saw me there, and they busted me, and I went home.
So this is right out. This went right into the book. This went right into Age of Consent.
Did not pass go.
Instead of U2, it's Bowie.
Although, yes, I put my real fantasy of what I wish I had seen.
It was a great fantasy. It's a great scene. I mean, you describe him singing and he's making eye contact with your protagonist, and it's
making
really,
out the skull.
Yeah, it's really an exciting scene. Really conveyed really well. But and I imagine that having an architecture degree helps in the real estate biz to some degree, especially in New York City.
Definitely.
But I'm guessing that wasn't the master plan for your life.
Well, I did practice architecture for a while and I loved being an architect. My husband's also an architect.
Okay.
We got to this crossroads when, I mean, this is just on a practical level. When our second child was born, we have 3 children, and we both were working. Architecture was incredibly demanding and pretty dreadfully underpaid. And we both were working all the time, making no money and not seeing our children. And we sort of sat down and decided whose trajectory was which. And I said, you know, I don't have to do this. You, however, have to do, this is what you have to do. This is your thing. So I said, you know, if I can go into real estate, which I've always been obsessed with, sort of a sport and a pastime in New York, by the way. So I said, if I could go into real estate, I'd probably make tons of money ultimately. And it's been great. I mean, it's given me the flexibility to write, be with my children, and I'm paid just on another level of what I made in architecture. Now, that's not true during COVID and it's not reliable, but it's been amazing. And
Yeah.
I get to meet all these architects who are looking at the apartments I'm selling. And I just think to myself, thank God it's not me.
That's great. That's cool. That's a great intersection of what you're doing and what you trained to do. But what was I gonna say? When did you learn to be such a good writer?
You know, it's practice, practice, practice. I mean, I didn't just, you know, writers aren't just hatched, as you know. I mean, you know that. I mean, you weren't born a good writer, probably. Maybe you were. I don't.
Oh no, I went to school for many years for it.
I think the first thing is that ever since I was ever since I could read, I've been an avid reader. I mean, I read nonstop. I read really great literature, even at a young age. And so I think that's the first step to being a writer, is to be a reader. And, you know, I know what a sentence should sound like, just it's in my brain, but it took me, if I look back at those first drafts, I mean, they're not so embarrassing. They could be worse, but they needed to get a lot better. I mean, it's just, I had this conversation yesterday with a colleague in real estate who was trying to publish his first novel. And I just said, you know, just just don't let anyone get in your way and say you can't do it. But just, if you keep getting rejected, just keep revising, because you can only get better. But it takes.
Did you have readers that you shared it with along the way? Or were you just working in isolation?
No, you can't really do that. But on the other hand, showing it to too many readers it's dangerous. So I worked with, for years, I've worked with this wonderful editor, Cynthia Kling, and she called me a promiscuous shower. You know, I would show the manuscript. I was like, I showed it to Alex and she said that I should be doing this. And then I showed it to John and he said I should. You can't do that because it's so subjective. So you have to be so careful, as you know, with to whom you show it and what you take from their reaction.
And at what point you show it. I find that I don't want to show anything till I absolutely am sure that I can't do any more with it or go any further with it.
I'm never sure of that.
Well, I'm not either. That's why I'm showing it to somebody. But I've reached a point where I don't know what to do next, or I can't see what to do next.
If you're knowledgeable enough about writing, then if somebody gives you bad advice, you recognize it as such. When I was first starting out, I would just listen to almost any advice I got because, of course, that person must know more than I did. And I would always show it to writers, and it was not great.
Yeah.
I'm working on my second novel now, and I haven't shown it to anyone.
How far along are you?
Well, that's a really hard question to answer. I would say in page count.
Yeah, just give me a page count. I want to compare it to where I'm at.
45,000 pages. I want this one to be short. I want it to be 65,000 words.
Yeah.
But I'm 45,000 words, but I'm almost at the end. So I need to go and backfill and stretch it out and stick flesh in between the bones.
As I'm listening to that, I can't help but ask you both a little bit about your process, and I'm going to interject here because that sounds to me, Amanda, like maybe your we've talked about in some of our interviews about the idea of being an overwriter or an underwriter and how you kind of approach it. I'd love to hear you both comment a little bit about your process of how you approach a project in general, maybe what the typical entry point is for you, whether you sort of think of a situation or a character pops into your head, or you start with like, I want to tell a story about this, like I want to tell this kind of story. And then sort of how you start fleshing it out. Are you an outliner? Are you a do you write hand, do you handwrite? Do you make crazy flashcard notes? I have a friend who's a thriller writer who my favorite thing ever is she's like, I mapped out my novel about this murder, and like her husband this whole time, she's like, for like 6 months I had like note cards about me mapping out this murder, and my husband never once asked me why I was mapping out a murder. He didn't ask her what she was doing, and she was like, I could have been planning to kill him. Like he didn't know it was fictional. But I'd love to hear maybe from Amanda first, and then Tim, like what your process is, how you approach a new project.
So I've recently heard this term, of course, and maybe all of you know this and writers know this. Are you a plotter or a pantser?
Pantser, yeah.
I am super pantser. I have an idea for a novel and then I just move forward.
You better tell them what pantser means.
Pantser is seat of the pants.
Just to be clear.
So just to be clear, seat of the pants, just do it as you go along, make it up as you go along, ad lib. I get to know my characters and my story on the page. I don't have this sort of preconceived notion of the whole bubble. Like, of course, we all know the story of J.K. Rowling saying, a flash came to her on the train and the entire Harry Potter saga was there. I don't even see how that's possible, but that's what I do. I do it as I go along.
And you were inspired by the stories you were hearing from people about that era. And that was kind of the...
I returned to those from time to time, but the story evolved. It's like you're sort of going down a road and then there's a couple forks like here and you're like, let me go down that road for a little while. And then if that is a dead end, you go back and you go down another road. And then sometimes I just go back to the beginning of the first road and move forward again and try to take a different part. I mean, I also compare it to knitting a sweater. Like you start knitting a sweater and then there's this ugly color that's in there and like you have to unravel it and re-ravel a new thread through there. And that's how I
did just to follow up, did you have a kind of a destination in mind, like where the novel was going to be at the end, where you were going? No, not at all. You really are.
And I just figured out with the second novel, I just figured out the ending, but I'm like, I'm there. And maybe I'll change it,
Yeah.
Then do you go back and revise with that knowledge in how you decided?
Yes. The other thing I'll say is that Age of Consent originally was 110,000 words, and now it's about 80 to 85,000 words. So I killed a lot of really fabulous darlings.
Killed some darlings, yeah.
Tim, how about you? What's your process like are you a pantser or a plotter, and how do you kind of enter into a new project?
Very much a pantser and very patient about waiting for the right project to come along. And it can be a long time between ideas that are compelling enough for me to start on. But basically, they have to be so compelling that I can't do anything else, that I'm just sort of thinking about it all the time. And I have to start doing it just to get it over with and get it out of my head, for better or worse. And that's how Descent, my first novel, began. I was actually was a carpenter most of my adult life. And I was working on a house in the Colorado Rocky Mountains. And I wasn't trying to write, I was just working on this house and I was just painting mindlessly. And this idea, this family coming up the Rocky Mountains started to enter my brain. And at one point I just had to, stop painting and start writing with, paint on my fingers and using the laptop. I can't do it any other way. I can't do it by hand. But to the idea of knowing where it was going, I thought I knew where it was going for a long time. And then I reached a point where I didn't want it to get there anymore. I didn't want it to go there. And I stopped writing it for a long time and used that time to sort of revise what I had. And until a new kind of ending came to me. And it was probably about a year before that ending occurred to me. So I'm very patient too about finishing something, particularly when I'm not under any kind of contract to finish. And that book took about 7 years really from start to finish. But I got, when I knew it was going, everything happened, the writing went very quickly.
That's so interesting. You're both pantsers, and you both also have a history in like working with building and you know, houses and like resident, like that's such
They're not cancer projects.
Yeah, no, those are not at all.
They're not. No, if you make a mistake, you know, in carpentry and building, it's a big pricey mistake. So you plan things out, you measure and you double measure and you write everything, you know, you draw your little drawings. But yeah, so, and I'm also like, I'm all about getting to know characters as I go. You know, I think of them as like, that's how you get to know anybody. You get to know people by spending time with them. And so in this new novel, The Current, you know, it begins with a couple of young women who go off on a road trip. And I really didn't know anything more about them than that. I just sort of, sounds a little creepy, but I just sort of imagined myself in the back seat, just listening to them and watching them. And that's how I got to know who they were and how they were different, you know. And there are other schools of thought where you should write some kind of biography of your character before you start writing your novel and know what's in their pockets or their purse or whatever. And I just never believed that. I never taught it to my students. I always thought that if you're not surprised by your characters or your story, your readers probably aren't going to be either. So the biggest fun for me is when something happens totally unexpectedly, but also just like, oh yeah, of course, that's how that's got to go. And so that's always exciting as a writer, to take some new twist that just unexpected, but feels really right. This is where I'm supposed to take this.
Amanda, did you have any of those big surprises?
It's such a great feeling. It's such a good feeling. I just realized the other day, like I completely had this idea for an ending for this new novel. And it was like, that was sort of where I'd been going all this time. And then all of a sudden I realized it should be exactly the opposite in a way. I mean, it's exactly the opposite of what I'd been thinking all this time. And it was just like, that's it. You know, it's such a aha kind of, it's an epiphany, and it's super exciting. It's electric.
Yeah. I'm going to take us back to the novel itself now and talk about the era in which you've written your novel, which has changed in the time that you've begun writing it. And I'm not speaking about COVID, I'm speaking about Me Too.
Right.
So, and a lot of these accolades comment on the timeliness of the novel, which is true. There are a lot of very sort of timely concerns in the book, mainly having to do with predatory older men and young women. I mean, it's not called Age of Consent for nothing. But it's also kind of out of time, because we're talking about 1983, and there's just not an awareness of, you know, the predatory, toxic masculinity. There's not a sort of general cultural consciousness about it that there is now. So your characters, your young women, react in ways that I think they wouldn't react today if they had grown up, you know, in this environment. When we've seen, you know, Cosby and Weinstein and Epstein and Larry Nassar and everybody in the news every day, and all those victim stories, and everything has changed. And I just wonder what it was like to be writing this book and living this different kind of time experience in the Me Too era.
People have asked me this a lot. I think it's really interesting, but it's funny because when I was writing the novel, I wasn't, you know, one of my editor at Viking, who had a sort of young assistant who read the novel and said, I don't understand, like, how did these parents allow this to happen? These girls were assaulted. I was like, what? Because I was sort of surprised by her reaction, because it's that is not what it happens in the novel at all. These are consensual relationships. These are girls who want to have these experiences with these older men. And it's set up as the boys they're mean, they're clueless, they're fumblers. And the girls see this older man as an opportunity for a true experience. And they want that experience. And so, one of the sort of more problematic relationships happens before the timeline of the novel and is reflected back upon. And then there's the affair with the teacher, which really comes to basically, it's creepy and it's strange, but Eve, the character, doesn't feel assaulted at all. She feels desired. And then when India, I don't want to spoil anything, but India's there is also something that's also can be seen as creepy and weird and strange, but she's beatific about it. So, when I was a teenager, almost every girl as a teenager has some flirtation, usually initiated by the older man, but to me, when an older man would flirt with me, I would think, well, of course I'm attractive. Why wouldn't he flirt with me? I mean, it didn't seem like, how could he flirt with me? He's so much older than I am. I mean, I would be like, oh, he likes me. So I think there's, without even recognizing any sort of impropriety. I mean, there was one time when one of my parents' friends said something lewd to me and I was like, how am I supposed to deal with that?
Yeah.
But if I thought he was cute, I would have been psyched. So, I mean, I think it's just reality. And I don't think that I saw this entire question of consent through the eyes of the protagonists who are consenting to this, whether it's right or wrong. And I leave it for the reader to judge. And I think through the lens of Me Too, it looks very different, but through the lens of those characters, it's something that they wanted and sought out.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the really daring and interesting aspects of the novel is it doesn't try to make demons of these men or victims of the protagonists. Although there is, if I read it correctly, there is a scene where, and I don't want to give anything away either, but there seems to be a sort of college or a party kind of situation, upstairs bedroom, not entirely consensual.
Right. So
moment.
that is true. There is a kind of what could ostensibly be considered kind of a date rapey kind of a situation.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I think it's mostly just sort of gross sexual encounter gone wrong. I think, obviously the victim is unhappy about it and angry about it, but I don't think she feels like she was raped. She just feels like she was an idiot. Now you can, I leave this to the reader, the reader can decide what they think about it, but plenty of that kind of stuff happened to us in high school and in college, and it happened to almost everybody. And, the difference between a consensual sexual encounter that doesn't end up being fun and a consensual encounter that ends up being fun. I think at the end of the day, it ends up not being fun and you think, God, that sucked. And does that make it non-consensual? No, it just means that it sucked.
Yeah. Well, it's again, I think it's one of the real fascinating and honest aspects of the novel that make it feel real and not manufactured for this time in some way,
Yeah, I'm not on a soapbox. I mean, it's
not at all.
At all. It's about coming of age and what young girls experienced then.
If we're doing all right on time, I'm going to sneak away from the heavy stuff.
Sure.
Now that we've talked about that. And another one of the pleasures of reading it is the whole time capsule thing in terms of just a different era in which teenagers, they have to find a phone to call their friends. They have to find like a working landline, and that's just hilarious to me now. And people smoke in restaurants, and David Bowie's alive and might show up in a club. And I just wonder, were there any challenges in accessing that period of time through memory, or was it just because
one funny thing that
I would
happened,
have to work at that, and I grew up in that era.
well,
you
you
know,
have I did a few things that were historically inaccurate, which I'm shocked,
Oh, really?
shocked by.
What were they?
So the first, and well, there were two really one of them was really embarrassing. I think I had Worcester Street going in the wrong direction, which, like, as a native New Yorker, I mean, if that had
Unbelievable.
been in the novel, I would have just changed my name. So, and then the other one was funny. It was, there was originally a fax machine in the prop warehouse in the office. And one of, I think maybe this 20-something assistant picked up on it and did a bunch of really good fact checking and found out that actually fax machines were not in regular use until 1986, which is shocking to me, but it's the truth. So I got rid of the fax machine. But God, thank God she caught that Worcester Street thing, because that was just terrible.
Things slip through, and your audience will eventually let you know. Someone will catch. Someone will catch it and let you know.
One other thing.
Did you know?
Right. I know, it's true. I think at one point also I had something in a dialogue, in a sentence that said, it's all about. Now, it's all about is clearly in the last 10 years. Like, you cannot use that for any other era. But I think one of the things that's interesting about that is that in terms of finding a phone, the novel I'm working on now is set in the present day. And how do you have characters communicating with each other without texting? I mean, I can't do it. It's not realistic. So they're not picking up the phone and calling one another. But I also don't want, that to be so dated.
Right.
It's a big challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and you can't watch a contemporary movie anymore without the text actually blurping up on the screen. That's just part of the narrative. That's part of the storytelling toolbox now.
It's true. And I mean, what
you see him going like this, and then the bloop shows up on your television screen.
I don't really know how to navigate that, honestly.
Well, you could just stay in the 80s.
I know. Actually, people have asked me if I'm going to write a sequel.
Well, people are going to wonder, if you wonder about what happens to these young women, beyond this era, beyond their time in the school. And do you imagine a life for them? And because your readers they'll want to know what happens to them.
Well, the ending is, the ending doesn't sew everything up perfectly. So I think, I did that on purpose, not because of the sequel, because I enjoy endings like that.
I did that too, but unfortunately I was writing in what was assumed to be a thriller genre, and people weren't too happy about that.
It happens.
Who did it?
Tie it up.
Yeah, tie it up. Well, lesson learned. But anyway, there's a lot of they're in school, and there's a lot of reference to art and music and literature and poems, and Catcher in the Rye is mentioned several times, and which it would be at that time and with this age group. And I'm just curious, was there any particular musical or art or literary influences that sort of shaped your narrative itself, or helped you along the way, or inspired you along the way?
I find that most of with the exception of Prep by Curtis Sittenfeld, there's very few boarding school novels, although this isn't technically a boarding school novel, but there are not that many novels set at boarding school partially that are from the female perspective. So, Catcher in the Rye is always thrown at boarding school students as like, this is your experience. Let me connect with you as a teacher. And I make fun of that in the novel. The teacher to connect with these teens through, Holden Caulfield at, happened 50 years ago, and he's a boy and he's kind of a loser, and it's just not a good way to connect, I don't think. But so no, I actually wished in a way that there were more books to which I could refer. As a teenager, I was, and you talk about art and music, I was completely obsessed with art, music, literature, poetry. I was obsessed with Baudelaire, as one of the characters is.
Yeah.
Baudelaire completely encapsulates angst, just sort of like over the top romantic angst. Like when you read it now, it's actually kind of I mean, it's absurd in a way. I mean, it's beautiful, but like, you're like, come on, chill out, dude. But so no, they really were not literary models for me. And I mean, they're writers, of course, that I admire and adore, and that list is long, but I didn't really have inspiration. I was inspired by the actual real stories and my own experience.
Well, that's good.
Well, you've written the tome for, you've written I love a good boarding school novel, and you're right, it's very, very difficult to find female centric. I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of the movie All I Want to Do from the 50s, which is a much more it's a much fluffier and less sort of gritty and less true to life. Probably it's a little more fantastical, but it stars Kirsten Dunst and Rachel B. Cook and all of these fabulous young actresses in a boarding school in the 1950s. It's Miss Goddard's. It's supposed to be Miss Porter's school for girls, but it's a fun it's a fun movie. Like, it's a fun, good time. But I love that whole world is so interesting because it's such a unique world, because you're so young and you're on your own in like a college setting, and that inevitably leads to, you having these characters that are maybe more mature than their peers that are going home to their parents every night. They have an independence and an agency that doesn't necessarily, which is your characters do. They have that unique.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. The agency.
Yeah. You guys are great. Oh my gosh, I want to keep this going, but we're kind of
okay.
We're edging close to an hour. By all means,
really?
Feel free
Time flies.
by all means, feel free to keep talking. But do you have maybe one juicy question that you'd like to ask Tim, and then I can ask you guys a quick one before we wrap?
What are you working on now?
I am. I'm working on. Yeah, this is the question you need to get used to. Everyone will ask it forever, and in a way, it's when your audience is asking it, it's like they're just saying, "Well, I really loved what you did. What do you got next for me?" It's a compliment. So I always make something up, even if I'm not working on something, just so they don't think I'm squandering their time. But yeah, I'm working on not giving up on something I started a while ago, and it's a challenge because COVID came along and it kind of interrupted things. Didn't really interrupt my life because I basically stay at home anyway. But not that I'm shut in, but I don't have a real job that I have to go to. This is where my keeper should walk by.
Yeah.
Jail keeper rattling his keys. But yeah, so I'm working on something that I started before COVID and before my knee replacement that I recently had, and trying not to give up on it entirely.
It's so
but
hard.
If I do, it's okay.
It's really hard. I mean, because what I'm working on right now, which I've told you a little bit about, I was going to ask you about this because I have another really, really exciting idea that came to me a couple of weeks ago. And I'm like, do I put this other thing aside, or do I race to finish it? Or I don't know what the right thing to do is. Or if I put it aside and then work on the other thing, then I'll be like 3 years from now and I'll have nothing. And I don't know what the answer is.
Do you keep a document? I mean, I always, for things like that, I have those ideas all the time in terms of so my background, I used to be a songwriter before I moved over to writing fiction, and I worked in the entertainment industry for a very long time. It's a lot easier to transfer an idea of a song, which takes, I can write a song in an hour sometimes, or 3 hours. Sometimes it takes me 3 years, but your turnout can be a lot quicker. With a novel, it's a lot harder because you have to dig in. You really have to get into the story. It takes a lot of time to write all these words. So what I do is I keep a document of all my ideas, and I put them all in the document, and I have a hard copy, and I have one on my computer in case anything ever happens. And I outline it as much as I can when I get the You know, I'm like, here's the idea. And sometimes it's a sentence, sometimes it's like 3 paragraphs, sometimes it's 4 pages. And then I just go, okay, and that idea will wait for me. And then I return, you know, to the project at hand that the and I don't know if that helps, you know, or anything like that, or if you do any sort of like thought cataloging like that, Amanda?
I have a sort of notes on my iPhone of novel ideas, and then I have countless little. I use these little cloth-bound notebooks, and I have different colors assigned to. Gray is work, my real job, and then hot pink is writing.
Oh, I love that.
Now I've gotten more nuance where like the different novel projects have different colors. One is green, one is red, one is pink. So I scribble in those and I keep those with ideas. But yeah, this is like a burning idea. And so I don't know how to deal with that.
You might have to, I mean, sounds like you're pretty close on this new. Can you give us any little details about what this new?
So it's about 2 women in their early 20s who look exactly alike.
Oh, cool.
This is the burning idea one?
No,
Oh, this is the one you're working on.
talk about the burning.
You can't talk it. The burning one is too.
Yeah. No, you should never talk about it.
Yeah. That's.
I will only add something that I was told or read a long time ago. It's always stuck with me. And I don't know who the original source is, but the gist of it is, if you have a really great idea, you should do your best to try and forget about it. And if it's a really great idea, you won't be able to. So to me, that means not writing down every great idea that comes to me, even though very few of them do. So there wouldn't be a lot of writing down anyway. But it's like, yeah, I don't write down ideas as a general rule and wait for them to become so compelling on their own that I have to start them. But that doesn't really help you. I'm just throwing it in there as an alternative.
I just love hearing the different philosophies because it's so like everybody approaches it a different way. Everyone comes with their own slant.
And they should. There is no one way to do it. But I think if you've got something burning in you, then that's when I would start working on that thing. But that's assuming I don't have something else I'm already working on. Like right now, if something else came along that was burning to me, I would drop this other thing.
But it sounds like you're already
exactly. It's not a big
love like this Deus Ex Machina to come in and
it's not a big leap for me at this moment, but
well, I hope you get that big idea, Tim. And Amanda, I'm so glad that you stuck with Age of Consent and brought it to life. It's a fabulous book. I highly encourage everyone to go out and pick it up. And ideally, we would love for you to pick it up from your favorite independent local bookstore, because we at Mighty Blaze love to support indies. We love bookstores. Bookstores are a cornerstone of all of our lives, and we want them to exist when the world opens up again. We would like them to be there for us to walk back into. So please, whenever possible, order books through independent bookstores, and specifically, if you would like to purchase Tim Johnston's The Current, you can check out one of his favorite local indies in Iowa City, which is the Prairie Lights Bookstore in Iowa City. And yep, that's the beautiful novel right there. And Amanda Brainerd's Age of Consent, please check it out, from McNally Jackson in New York. And obviously they have 4 locations. They have their Manhattan locations and Brooklyn locations. And, you know, thank you to the bookstores for pivoting. We know that they're doing a great job. These bookstores are killing themselves to get books to you, and they've really, so many of them have had to embrace a whole different way of doing business. It's not easy to make that switch, and they have done that. So thank you to all the bookstores. And once again, Amanda, congratulations.
Thank you for having me, Jenna. Tim, thank you so much for a great
Thank you, and good luck. I think you have many more great moments to come.
I hope so.
Thank you so much both for joining us, and thank you to all the viewers for joining us today. Please, again, pick up The Current by Tim Johnston and Age of Consent by Amanda Brainerd, and we will see you next week on Celebrity Conversations. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jenna.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.